Season 1 has kicked off to an absolutely insane start. Tons of buffs and nerfs mixing up the meta, and everyone getting deranked, causing players to be all over the place. This is the Wild West of Marvel Rivals, and if you want to succeed, you need these 10 tips to dominate in Season 1. But if you want to find community conversation and improve at Marvel Rivals, plus find a perfect duo partner, definitely check out our Discord in the links down below, and I will see you there. Now, the first thing that you have to consider when walking into Season 1 is that synergies are just completely busted. Like, we already understood just how strong synergies were. Yeah, it's a neat little ability that you get when you play two characters together, and yeah, it seems kind of cool, but let's just play the meta heroes instead. But the more and more we play with synergies, the more we realize just how strong some of them are and how much they should dictate what compositions you are playing. Think of synergies as a free ability that you get, and some of these can really turn the tides of an entire game to the point where one team could be playing well, but the other team has 2-3 synergies on their team, and it's enough to change the tide of the game. Like, for instance, running Mantis Warlock and Star-Lord is just insane. Not only are these two of the best supports you could play and one of the best DPS you could play, but now y'all can legitimately turn fights where y'all trade out, everyone resurrects on their own accord, and y'all are basically pulling fights back from the brink in a way that shouldn't really be possible. Really good Black Panthers seem really difficult to stop. Add the synergy to them, and then they are actually impossible to stop. Don't even get me started about Luna and Namor this season. Such a powerful duo of just characters that are automatically good, and then they get better with the synergy. And this is how being flexible as a player could start to really translate into tangible wins in Season 1, and it's where you could play one DPS you normally play, but if you could play another DPS that plays off of a synergy one of your teammates has, all of a sudden you're getting way more value off of that. Like, I could play Bucky just randomly, or I could swap to Namor with my Luna Snow synergy, and all of a sudden I'm bringing so much to the table, and most of the time the synergies are worth it, to where unless you're dramatically worse at that character, the synergies are bringing so much free or intrinsic value that it's hard to say no. One of the things this could also allow you to do is kind of build a comp like Build-A-Blocks, where you're seeing certain characters and kind of identifying certain strong synergies that are possible based on what you can play. Like, if I get someone locking magic, I'm locking Black Panther. And if I get someone locking Hela, I'm locking Thor. I want those reses. And if I get someone that locks Mantis, I might play Adam Warlock. And I'm not saying to just constantly play characters that you don't normally play, but I would say when crafting your hero pool and understanding the meta as a whole, learning synergies and thinking about synergies in that equation can be the thing that gets you more wins. There's a reason why every pro composition has a heavy synergy emphasis. It's because it's free freaking value. It's so strong. It's more broken than ever. You gotta abuse it. If you're duoing or trioing, practice characters together that have synergies, win games. That's as simple as it is. Now, the second thing that you need to do to dominate in Season 1, this is the season of powerful utility that you need to break. Loki clones. Loki's really strong. You gotta destroy the freaking clones. You gotta destroy the freaking totems whenever you can, and this is everyone's responsibility. When you can, do it. Just get rid of them. Same thing with Name More Squids. If you have the capability to do this, you need to do this at all times. It frees up your entire team. Don't look at this piece of utility and think it's someone else's job. It's free value just sitting there. Just do it. Just break these squids, break these clones, break this totem. Onks are a big one. If you allow Onks to stick around, they will kill your team. You will get rolled by Moon Knights in this season, especially. Break Onks. Punisher turrets are now something that everyone needs to focus on and deal with, or else you're going to lose to just a Punisher just sitting there AFK. And isn't that kind of silly to lose to something that literally can't move? And then BRB is also something that is just so powerful. One of the reasons that Rocket has such a high win rate is because of his BRB. Being able to hunt this, destroy this, find this, identify where it's at, communicate to your team about where it's at, super important stuff. If you do not deal with this utility, then you're just going to lose to it for free. And if you have the capability, then it should be you. You're not always going to have the capability, right? If you're like a Black Panther, you're not going to reasonably kill, like, I don't know, a Loki clone, right? Unless you're up close. But if you can, you should, right? That's the rule. If you can, you should. And maybe that's not your responsibility as Panther, but going and chasing down that BRB and destroying it is. So there's always responsibilities that you need to take on yourself if you can, if it's there, because you're just going to lose the game otherwise. Now, the third thing is going to be a weird tip, but it's to not always be a leader. And here's the thing. This is important to understand the full context of this. How many times have y'all been playing in your games and it feels like you always got something close to working, but you never could? You're always getting someone low. You're always getting someone out of position. You say one person, hit this person. No one ever follows up, and it feels like you're never able to secure a kill or win a fight, right? Well, a lot of people on your team are going to feel the exact same way as you. As much as we like to believe that our teammates are just like staring at a wall eating glue, they're not. They're trying to enact their own game plan, but most of the time, it's not lined up with yours. They're trying to do something. They're fighting someone on the flank. They're fighting someone on the back line. They're diving someone in the enemy back line. And you're fighting someone on the front line. Everyone's doing something different. And it happens. In a game like this, everyone either wants to be a leader where they're the one in charge, and if they say something or they're targeting something, it's the target. Or everyone assumes that what they see is what everyone else sees, so they don't say anything and then they lose. But this is why in some of these games, you need to be like, take a breath, slow down, and look at what your teammates are doing. Slow down your play. Don't go for things by yourself. Find what your teammates are doing, find what any teammate is doing, and just help them. You can always walk out of spawn, go with your own game plan, maybe communicate it and see if it works. But if things stop working, if things start breaking down, if nothing is happening at all, it's almost always a case of everyone just being not on the same page. And sometimes you'll run into those games where people just magically are on the same page. Everyone is magically thinking about the exact same thing, and you just roll the enemy team. Everyone's gone through that experience, but that's just random. You're just lucky that that happened. You're not setting that up. You're not analyzing what happens. And it's really important for you to be able to turn around some of these games where there is like an active anti-synergy. Everyone has a naturally different inclination. Some people want to push in and roll the enemy team and snowball. Some people want to stay back, be defensive, and play safe. But if people are off on that, then some people are going to die and some people are going to live, and then you're going to lose the fight for free. So unless you're someone that is willing to hop on the mic, try to communicate as well as you can, try to lead your team, try to coordinate, then you need to oftentimes take a back seat, look at what your teammates are doing, try to assist them, find ways to double down on the value someone else is creating instead of trying to create your own isolated value somewhere where your team is not. The number 4 is positioning. Season 1 is a season of positioning fundamentals and getting punished for positioning. So how do you have good positioning? What's the TLDR or the 101 on positioning? Number 1, you need to be near pieces of cover. And I'm not talking about the cover that can be destroyed. I'm talking about the pieces of cover that will not. Corners, walls, things that you can use to not only cut line of sight, but also deny enemy abilities. There's a lot of abilities that work via LOS, line of sight, and you need to be able to cut that at any time whenever you want to. And the simple way to think about this is that good position gives you options. You get the option about when you fight. If someone's in the open and you have a piece of cover, if you don't want to fight them, you don't have to fight them. You can go behind the piece of cover. If they don't want to fight, what can they do? They're in the middle of the open. They don't have that option. A wall is almost like an ability. It's something that you get to just use whenever you're losing, whenever you don't want to fight, whenever you need healing, whenever you need a refresh on cooldowns, whatever. And it's in your best interest to have these covers around you automatically. In the way that you walk around the map, in the way you navigate from one place to the next, you're going from one corner or wall to another one, so you always have these areas to play around. Another thing you should think about is time. If enemies try to pursue you, how much time can you buy for yourself before you give your teammates time to help you out? One of the things that a lot of players complain about is that they need healing right away. They're like, I need healing, I need healing, I need healing. Or a support has like a diver on them and they're like, I need help, I need help, I need help. The longer you can give your team between the I need help to them being able to help you without you dying, the better you are as a player. Like, I get it. As a support, the second you even smell a Black Panther, you want them to be freaking murdered by your Bucky, right? And the second that you take even a tiny bit of damage as Iron Man, you want your supports to heal you instantaneously, right? I'm going to tell you, if you had those players on your team that would insta-kill and insta-heal, they would not be in your rank. And it's not like you need that in order to carry. In fact, you carry by not needing that. You carry by being someone that doesn't need a lot from your team. And positioning is the cornerstone to that. Playing in a place where you can constantly back away from opponents, constantly cut line of sight, constantly force the enemies into bad positions if they want to pursue you, and give your team time to intervene. The better you are at not needing things, like the less needy you are, the better you are as a player. And it all starts with positioning. I have a huge positioning guide on this channel that you're going to want to check out if you really want to know more. But it's not what you could do when you have good DPS, good healing, good good space. It's what you can do when you don't. Bad healing, slow DPS, bad space, no space. Ranking up is actually predicated on what you can do in those situations, how you perform in those situations. Number 5 is about counters. And I know no one wants to have the counters talk about counters existing or not existing, but here's the reality. There are characters that have really lopsided matchups in Marvel Rivals, and if you don't know about them or even think about them, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. So like as an example, in reasonably high, mid to high elo, if they're playing Groot and 2 tanks, so Groot and another tank, you will get rolled by a good Wolverine almost every time. Groot is its easiest target. Wolverine's very good against 2 tanks. Wolverine will literally feast on you. Remember, he scales based on max HP. He'll kidnap the Groot into your team, kill you, and there's really nothing you can do about it. There's very little counterplay to that, and if you are forcing yourself to fight into that over and over again, yeah, you can win against the worst Wolverine, or maybe if you just play immensely better than the enemy team, but you're stacking the odds against you in a way that is probably frustrating and unnecessary. Not even pro players would do that. In fact, pro players are swapping off when this is something that is being played against them. Another thing to consider is that there are certain characters that demand certain things. So like if the enemy is playing Iron Man Storm, playing a composition that can't contest these things in any way is most likely going to get you the loss. Now in a hyper optimized situation, maybe you're playing Double Diver, you dive the backline, you obliterate the backline, you kill the tanks, and then eventually you just clean up the flyers, right? This can hypothetically work in a perfect world, but ranked is not a perfect world. The reality of it is these flyers are going to be uncontested. They're going to never die, and they're going to roll your team over and over and over again unless you play certain characters that can fight them. And there's a lot of characters that can do so. From the support role, Adam Warlock can just dink the hell out of flyers. From the DPS role, traditional hit scans like Hela and Punisher. Also characters like Star-Lord and Psylocke even has game against flyers. Characters like Namor are actually really good against flyers. There's a lot of options. And from the tanking category, oftentimes you're not trying to fight these characters directly, but you're trying to put pressure on the enemy supports so that they can't heal as easily and they have to back up and position really passively. You're trying to put pressure on the tanks so that your DPS and your supports have plenty of space to deal with these flyers. And if you just kind of like are getting stomped by certain characters in this game and just completely ignore it, turn a blind eye to it, don't adapt your play, don't adapt what you're playing, you're gonna lose. And maybe in some of the lower elos you can just kind of coast by just by being amazing at your character. And honestly, in the long term, you can climb any character, one trick any character, you can climb to the highest elos unless you get banned. You could still climb, right? That's true. But there are gonna be games that you could have won if you either would have been more flexible or you would have adapted your play to counteract these things. Also, there are going to be certain things that you have to change your play fundamentally around. So like one of the biggest combos that's going around right now is Moon Knight plus Groot or Namor plus Groot, which will just kill enemies through support ults. So if you're Luna or Mantis, you can't pop your support ults. You'll literally just die into the combo. So if you just automatically in your head have it, oh, Groot ults, I'm going to ult. Groot ults, I'm going to ult. Every single time, you're actually going to just get washed over and over again. This doesn't mean that you can't beat these things. You just have to think about this first before you play, adapt your play to the situation, and change how you're using abilities, ultimates, how you're positioning, and things like that so that you can still overcome. The number 6 is about risk versus reward when trying to make plays. So you can make plays from any role. You can make plays from tank, DPS, and support. And all this means is going for something that might just win you the fight for free. Might generate a pick, might shut someone down. This means you could be W-keying someone that's on their own isolated angle as Thor. Or it means you could be going for a really aggressive play as Psylocke to try to burst someone down and kill them. Or maybe as a support, you find a little off angle, you sleep someone as Mantis and you kill them. Like, these are aggressive plays, right? And they can win you fights, right? But you need to understand that there are times to be risky and there are times to be very, very safe. And it typically all depends on what ultimates you have. Like, if we have fought and traded resources with the opponents, they used both support ults, our Psylocke still has her ult. Right now, in this moment, I am not going for anything. I'm not poking damage. I'm not applying pressure. Doesn't matter what character I am not doing anything right now. And the reason I'm not is because I don't want the opponent supports to be able to farm their defensive ultimates to shut down our win condition. I'm also not going to go for an aggressive play. I'm also not going to go for a flank play or do anything crazy. And similarly, if I'm the Psylocke, I am going to be very specific with my plan. We're going to go in, we're going to apply pressure. I'm going to go in, I'm going to ult someone I know I can kill, or 2 people I know I can kill, right? I'm not going to get sidetracked chasing around a Black Panther. I'm not going to get sidetracked trying to one-shot anybody. I'm going in for the play. And the reason is because the failure of any play you make, anything that can distract you, is a failure of the game plan that will win you the fight. The game plan matters the most. It's like eye on the prize, right? You want to get distracted with all this stuff, and there's plays that you can make, and this is all fine in a normal situation. But when you have the win condition all lined up, you can't go for anything risky that would mess up the win condition. I see this most often where like supports are pretty reasonably close to ultimates on your team, and then a big fight happens, and then someone's like, okay, I'm going to go make a really aggressive play. So the Black Panther goes in really hard, uses all of his cooldowns, goes really crazy, and then dies. And then your team gets wiped because everyone went for their own play. Everyone was like trying to make something happen. They kind of felt the writing on the wall, and they were trying to make something happen to win that fight. And then y'all all get wiped and die. But really, the solution was to not speed up the fight. It was actually to slow it down. Play passive, play reserved. Because the way that you could easily win that fight is through the chaining of support ults, but because you tried to create something, you tried to risk for a reward in this moment, when you had more definitive value coming just around the corner, you sped up the fight, and you almost sped up your own loss, when if you would have slowed things down, you would have played for that ultimate. You could actually see this to a larger extent. What high elo players do, or even tournament players do, is let's say the opponents have some really powerful ultimates coming up. Let's say they have Doctor Strange ult, and maybe a Psylocke ult. Some really powerful ultimates, and your supports are at like 80% or 85%, right? What they will do oftentimes is they will back up. They will give space on point. They'll give up space on the objective even. Maybe they'll play in a really passive position, almost completely off the site, just trying to poke and generate those support ults. And that might mean giving up 1 or 2 ticks on point. And you might ask, why would they just give up 1 to 2 ticks on point if they're all alive? Well, the reason they're doing that is because they'll have no way to win the fight if they don't have ults to counter ult the enemy ults. So they put themselves in a position where they can still generate ult charge. They're really defensive, so they're really hard to ult and actually wipe. And then once they get that percentage, once they get those ultimates, now they can go out. Now if the opponent's ult, they can trade their defensive ultimates for those ultimates and then actually have a real fight. So it's understanding, what is the win condition? How do I need to fight? What's the risk? What's the reward? How do I need to play? This is pretty complex of a concept, but it's something that I want you to start thinking about now, because as you start to climb and get better at the game, you're really going to be able to think about how should you be playing here, and it doesn't always fit your natural instincts. Sometimes your natural instincts is, I need to make a play, but the reality of it is you actually need to just play safe, live, and minimize risk because you got something coming along the way. And number 7, this one's a huge one that you need to start doing if you want to improve, and it's analyzing your own gameplay. On the second channel, Coach Mills 2, we actually did some short VOD reviews over a tank, a DPS, and support. You can check it out in the links down below. A lot of people liked being able to see the mistakes in gameplay, but I'm going to tell you right now that you could do it with your own gameplay, and it really helps you improve. And this is the things you look out for when you're trying to VOD review and improve your gameplay. Number 1 is deaths. Look at where all your deaths were. How did you die? Especially deaths where you died first, it's almost always a mistake that you made. What could you have done? How could you have positioned? How could you have used your abilities leading up to your death to change that outcome? That's the first thing. Number 2 is ultimates. Ultimates are something that we use a lot of throughout a game. Every single one of those is an opportunity to carry. How did you use your ultimate? What did you use it for? Was there a better way to use it? Did you think about the things that could have stopped your ultimate from getting value? These are all important. I just VOD reviewed a gold Psylocke on my channel that actually just ulted randomly. They didn't think about cloaks fade. They didn't think about any defensive ultimates. They didn't think about anything besides, hey, look, there's people, let's ult them. That's not enough. You're gonna be losing games if you do not think a little bit deeper about how and why your ultimate will succeed or fail. Past that, it's team fights, the start and end of a team fight, the decisions you make in them, and ability use as well. Those things are a little bit more complex, and typically because there's all these little micro decisions, that's where a coach can come in. But deaths and ultimates are a lot easier to analyze yourself. Find the core things that you're doing wrong, because I'm going to tell you this, if you do more consistently with each and every life and each and every ultimate, and you die less overall, you're going to climb. That's as simple as it is. But now let's talk about the roles. And first off, of course, we got to talk about support. And right now, the biggest mistake I see at every single elo, no matter what, every kind of player is doing this, is double support holding. Double support holding is losing people games all over the place. Literally all over the place. In fact, one of the games I VOD reviewed, it was a Grandmaster 1 player from last season. that they double support ulted and lost. And it's super simple not to double support ult. Communicate. Say, hey, I'm going to ult first. I'm going to ult first, you can ult second, or just call, hey, I'm going to ult first, or type, I'm going to ult first. This is a super simple thing to do, but it comes to the point where if an opponent uses one ultimate and y'all double support ult, what are you going to do for the second ultimate? You're going to die to it every single time. This is something that you can just like never do on support ever, and it's super, super important not to make this mistake. The other huge mistake that a lot of support players are making is they are ulting just to fight better. Their team is fighting the enemy team, and they just pop their ultimate so that their team can fight more. They say something like, push into the fight, fight more aggressively, walk forward, keep fighting, when they're popping their ultimate. This could be a Luna ultimate, a Mantis ultimate, a Cloak and Dagger ultimate, and the reason that this is not a great use of an ultimate is because there's no guarantee it's going to win you the fight. You have to kind of rely on a lot of things. You have to rely on your teammates being able to use more HP. You have to rely on the opponents not being able to back up and kite away from your ultimate. You have to rely on several things. And I'm not saying don't ultimate aggressively, but what I am saying is an ultimate, especially a support ultimate, should typically do one of two things. It should find a way to save you from losing a fight. This is using it defensively to shut down any ultimate. You know, Winter Soldier ultimate, Psylocke ultimate, Eye of Agamotto, whatever. It stops you from losing a fight. Or it should create an advantage. And I'm not talking about just topping people up that are low. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about giving you an opening to actually close out a fight. And this means that maybe you see your opponents slightly on the back foot, slightly reeling. You know that if you add a little bit of pressure here, they'll crumble. Boom, Mantis ult. Go in, roll them, kill them. You used your ultimate, you won the fight. That's a good use of the ultimate. But you see your tank walk forward. He takes a little bit of damage, and you're like, okay, I'm going to pop Luna Snow ult. That's not doing anything that's going to generate you an advantage. That's not creating a potential game or fight-winning play. It's just taking off stress or burden from you in that moment, and then hoping your team will follow up after the fact. That's not the same thing. Now, there are going to be times where you have to kind of use a nonsense ult because you know your team is just going to die and fall apart. Like one of your supports dies, and your team is all low. You know you got to do something, but that falls into the first category, right? That falls into the category of I needed to ult or else my team would fall over. But I want you to be really sure that that was the case. Be really sure that if you wouldn't have ulted, your team would have lost the fight. Be very, very sure, because more often than not, people are ulting in situations that in reality, your team could have just survived and sustained and backed up and give ground and not fallen over. And then you give away your ultimate that's going to actually either create an advantage for you down the line to win the fight or prevent you from losing the fight to many of these really powerful ultimates that are around. Now, tank players, you are not off the hook because there's a lot of things tank players are doing wrong, and the biggest one is not backing off of ult and pressure. So one of the things I talk about the most when I talk about tanks is the internal balance beam of advantage. What team is advantaged in this moment? You always need to know. And that means that if someone on your team is dying, you cannot just stand on the front line like nothing happened. If two of your teammates dying, you cannot just stand at the front line on the choke with no care in the world. Oh, I'm just going to keep standing here. You can't do that. You can't push forward. And if you're fighting, someone dies, your teammates start using bubbles on you, like your Magneto bubbles you, your teammates start to help you. You can't just keep walking forward. You need to keep walking back because you've got to recognize, hey, we have one less person to apply pressure. Hey, we don't have these cooldowns that kept me alive. I can't afford to be aggressive here. I need to be passive. I need to wait. I need to give my teammates time to respawn. I need to give my teammates time to heal me up. I need everyone time to get their cooldowns back. Before I make any sort of stand, I need my team to be okay. I need our pressure to be okay. But more often than not, tanks are not thinking about this. They're pushing in when their teammates are low resources. They're backing up when they have a huge advantage. You need to make sure that you're not doing this. And a really, really big part of this as well is ultimates. Ultimates. When an opponent uses an ult, like a Luna Snow uses an ult, you do not push forward and fight the ult. You back up. You back up. You back up. You back up. You make your opponents keep walking more and more and more forward. You're giving up all this ground so that when the ultimate ends, then you didn't die, you didn't fall over, you didn't crumble, and then you can fight back. And ideally, you played far enough forward first so that you had space to back up too in case enemies start to invest ultimates. Like, ideally, you don't want to have to back up so far that you give up the objective, right? Because then you have no choice. You put yourself kind of in a corner where it's like, I have no choice but to fight on point, even when my opponents are just pressing all of their ult buttons, right? But if you fought them far enough forward. You kind of stood your ground far enough forward so that when your opponent started investing ultimates, you have places to back up to without giving core objectives. That is the best case scenario, because then you still can live, you give up that space, but at the cost of trading for an ability or an ultimate, and then you can reclaim that with your own ability, your own ultimate, or just fighting the enemy now that the ultimate is done. You also got to understand that you should not only be pressuring tanks as a tank. If you are a tank, you want to be putting pressure everywhere, and keep in mind that pressure or damage is worth more on squishies than it ever is on a tank, because, you know, you do like 100 damage to a tank, they're going to get healed, they're going to wipe it off, they don't care. But you do 100 damage to a squishy, a DPS, he's going to back away. To a support, she's going to back off. All of these people, when you can apply damage to these players. So like if I'm Magneto, I'm not poking the enemy tank right in front of me. I'm poking the DPS, the layer behind him, or the supports, the layer behind that, because the pressure I put on those people force movement, force action, apply pressure, because these people have to back up. These people have to get healed. These people need immediate attention, and the tanks do not. So every bit of damage I apply to them is actually worth more than the damage that is applied to a tank, unless the damage I apply to a tank actually generates a kill. And in the neutral, or like in the base game, more than likely it's not. But if the tank is like way out of position, then of course we could shoot it with our team. It's worth more to focus it. Don't shoot the backline if there's a tank like in your team 1 HP. But in general, if you're focusing the tank the entire game, you're focusing the one target that cares less about your damage than any other target on the entire field. Now, DPS players, I didn't forget about you either. And there's a lot of things DPS players are doing wrong in general, but the thing you need to think about the most going in as a DPS in Season 1 is become a threat or become an answer. Being a threat is something that is proactive, something that wants to execute its own game plan, something that wants to shut down the enemy team. So you're a Wolverine, gripping people in. You're an Iron Man, zapping people with your beam with the Hulk synergy. You're Black Panther, dashing through the back line. You are a threat that if the opponents cannot answer, you win. And you're going to dominate, you're going to get a lot of value. But sometimes, even if you're a good threat, your team might need an answer instead. Sometimes your team is getting folded faster than you can make a play. Sometimes your team is dying and in need of help. And in your mind, you're thinking, I'm doing a lot, why should I help my team? But the reality of it is, you can do as much as you want. If your team needs an answer to a threat, and you're not that answer, then you could just lose the game no matter how good you play. And maybe that means swapping it up, away from a threat, away from someone that is trying to be proactive, and instead playing someone more defensive. Characters like Namor that are extremely good at shutting enemy threats down. Characters like Bucky that can hook that Wolverine and punish him so that your tank doesn't get abused over and over again. Understand that you can also change up your play style to where you are an answer to a good threat instead of the threat yourself. So, you know, I could play a Psylocke that's really proactive and diving the backline, or I could play a Psylocke that marks the enemy Psylocke, follows them around, punishes them for being aggressive, and then gets that threat off my team. Yeah, I'm not going to go assassin and get as many kills as I normally would, but I'm keeping my team alive, and that might be the thing that actually wins me the game. Now, as a DPS, you need to focus most on keeping deaths low and playing at the pace of a team. It's always winnable if you are alive, but a lot of times DPS players will allow one death to snowball into two. They'll see their team kind of staggering in and they'll do it as well. They'll make mistakes with their team and die more and more and more. But if you're a DPS that can keep their deaths to an all-time low, prioritize their life, and make sure that they are playing fundamentally good, you can find ways to win fights, turn fights, punish people, especially that overextend. One of the things that always happens is players want to snowball, they want to wipe your team. And DPS is the one class that can heavily punish people for being over-aggressive. You see, if there's anything that a DPS does that other roles do not, is it demands a certain level of respect for what you can do. If you don't respect a Hela, she's going to get 3 kills and she's going to kill your team. If you don't respect a Hawkeye, he's going to dink everyone on your team and you're going to lose. If you don't respect a Black Panther, he's going to dash through your team a million times and kill them all. And this is especially powerful when you're alive, you're regrouping, you're always like a core for your team, and opponents want to push up, be aggressive, and disrespect your ability to turn the tables on them. Because that's what DPS can do. They can turn the tables on people a lot, and all of a sudden, a fight that you just lost turns into a fight that you won because 2 people pushed up really aggressively, trying to snowball your team. You're there, you're playing passive, you're playing fundamental, you see an opening, boom, you punish them, and you turn that fight. The last thing I want you to think about as a DPS is to create optimal conditions for ults. I understand that a lot of ults are just ones that you want to pop. They're flashy, they do cool stuff, but set up the optimal conditions so that every single ult is giving you a path to win the fight. It might not win the fight for you by itself, but it gives you something to work with. Now, this could mean combo them, like with the Moon Knight or Namor with the Groot thing, for example. This means that you don't ever really want to ult outside of Groot's ult. Like, if you use your ult and then your Groot has ult, the timing is off and you don't have the synergy, so it might mean saving your ultimate to make sure you combo it every single time. It also might mean create optimal conditions for that ult in the way of baiting out support ultimates. You have Psylocke ult, you're going to heavily pressure their supports until they pop ult. Then you're going to walk into the next fight and you're going to actually win the fight with it. You're not going to just pop your ultimate just for no reason. But maybe if you have another ultimate on your team, maybe the play is to pop your Psylocke ult, bait out that defensive ultimate, instantly cancel, run away. That might be the play. You got to think about the whole team's ability to do something, not just yours. Now, once again, if you really want to get better at these characters, I would highly recommend checking out my VOD reviews that I did on the second channel, Coach Mills 2. Link will be in the description down below, because we go over to a lot of the micro decision making in detail, and we're going to do more of them on that channel, so check that out. Now, the last tip is definitely the most important tip in the video, and it's that your rank is gonna be freaking random. Right now, everyone is everywhere. People are in ranks with people that weren't in their rank last season. Everyone's up and down. I don't want you to think that deeply about what your rank is right now. You're still the same player that you were last season. You're still just as good as you were last season. But I want you to mostly focus on getting better, improving, become better right now. Don't worry so much about what your status is, what your rank is. That's going to come and go. Right now, I want you mostly to be experimenting, trying things, becoming better, and not be overly worried about your wins and losses, and not getting overly frustrated with you're not getting the results that you want right away. This is going to be a really long season, 3 months. We have a lot of time to develop and get to the rank you want. And I promise you, if you want to get to gold, platinum, diamond, celestial, grandmaster, eternity, or even freaking one above all, I will help you do that. I'll give you the advanced guides, the tips, everything you could possibly need to help you. So don't get too caught up in what you need to be right now. And don't get too frustrated with what I would say is the best time of gaming, getting better, because you will get better. I promise you'll get better. I'll get better. We'll all get better. And it all starts with the right mindset. So lock the hell in, and we're gonna have a great season 1. But thanks so much for coming by. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely check out the Discord for a community of like-minded individuals down below, and I'll see you there.